Welcome to the Tri247 2023 Triathlon Awards. I'm Jenny Lucas-Hill. I'm a writer and content creator at Tri247 and I'm an age group Ironman triathlete.
Hi, this is John Levison, currently the chief correspondent for Tri247. Also do some event commentary online and in person. I've been writing for Tri247 for a long time, maybe about 15, 16 years.
Just to round off, I'm Thomas Land. I'm a staff writer for Tri247. Haven't quite been here as long as John, but I've been in the position for about a year. I'm a keen age group triathlete and a winner as well.
So today we've got the very tricky task of looking back at what's been an incredible year in triathlon and trying to decide on the best athletes, performances and races from 2023. Before we dive into discussing the awards, John, Thomas, I'd love to get your reflections on this year in triathlon, maybe your top moment or something that's excited you the most over the year.
Yeah, I think overall it's been a very solid year, and I would say a stronger year than last year. I think one of the things that characterised last year were it felt like we missed quite a lot of the head-to-heads. Unfortunately, COVID was still around, so there was lots of people missing races with COVID or with injuries and things like, for example, this year we get to the Women's World Championship at Hawaii, and I think we were all literally, not just us three, Tri247 as a whole, and in fact the industry all going genuinely, without exaggeration, we think we've got a race with everybody that can win, and also chuck in a wild card like Taylor Knibb. So there's been some great head-to-head races, some good battles. Some tough times as well, like fortunate events of Hamburg and Cork and others. So it's not always, all smiles and rainbows, unfortunately. Such is the way of life. But in terms of performance of the year, I think it's been a very, very strong year from beginning to end.
Yeah, I think I would just second that from John. I think the depth that we've seen across the board this year, from the Super League races to the WTCS, and then up to the Ironman and PTO events across both the men and women's race, has just been off the charts. I think in terms of competitiveness, is week in, week out, got to be one of the best seasons of triathlon that I've had the pleasure to be able to watch and report on.
I completely agree with both of you. I think, for me, I think a top moment's got to be obviously going into Kona and just seeing that sort of strength and depth of the field and genuinely not being able to think about who could possibly win because there were so many sort of contenders. And then, we had that Jan Christian kind of head-to-head going on in the PTO. And then we saw that similar dynamic with Annie Haug and Ash Gentle. It just felt like a really exciting year for the sport. But as you say, John, obviously some tough times as well. Okay. So on to the awards. We've got 5 categories for our 2023 awards. And how this is going to work is for each category, we've got a shortlist put together by the Tri247 team. In each category, 2 of us are going to be tasked with debating that shortlist, and one of us is going to have to make that super tricky final decision. And those roles are going to rotate as we go through. On each round, we'll also have one of us who gets to play a wild card, meaning that person can introduce one extra athlete or race into the debate. So without further ado, let's dive into our first award category. So we're kicking things off with the best overall female and male triathletes. This is across all race distances, Super League, World Triathlon Circuit, all the way up to the full long distance racing scene. John, it's on you this time to make that tough final call on who wins. Good luck with that. And Thomas, it's you and I who are going to debate the potential winners. So I think, should we start with the best female triathlete? We've already kind of broken our own rules here, haven't we? Because we were sort of aiming for 3 people, but it was just way too difficult. So we've got 4 women here to discuss. We've got Annie Haug, Taylor Knibb, Beth Potter and Ashley Gentle, and I've also got a wild card to introduce into the conversation. So Thomas, you can kick us off. Let's start with Annie Haug. What are your thoughts?
I think just as good as ever. It's just going from strength to strength. She's racing at such a high level when for so long she's been so good. Again, such a strong batch of women as well. In Kona, Lucy Charles Barkley had the race of her life to win. And Haug maybe wasn't up there, but she was still competitive. She still found herself on the podium once again. And in the short distances as well, over the 100k in Ibiza, she was just unstoppable. And I think that took a lot of people by surprise for her to be Ashley Gentle, who up until that point had been the best. over that distance with such ease on them.
It's kind of hard to disagree, really. I think obviously Kona, we saw her setting that run course record, and then, as you say, Ibiza was just a stunning performance, and then even Singapore, that was kind of a question of what could have been, because I think she lost 2.5 minutes to the front of the race with that bike mechanical, and then she actually was only in second place by 2:15, I think. So it's kind of, what could have been if that hadn't happened. So definitely a strong contender. We've talked about Ash Gentle, so I think maybe let's talk about Ashley next. 100% podium record in 2023. What do we think about that?
Ashley Gentle, I think, maybe didn't have the best season. Obviously, still stayed on the podium in the early races, but definitely towards, Singapore was probably her highlight, and then to finish that kind of period off with her 10th Noosa win as well. I think she kind of improved as the season progressed and showed everyone heading into next year, which according to the PTO is going to be the biggest calendar yet, why you just can't write her off over the 100k distance.
I think she's sort of that queen of 100k, and I'm quite excited to see how that Annie Haug Ash Gentle dynamic is going to work out. So now throwing Taylor Knibb into the discussion, super versatile. I don't think there are many athletes who can go and qualify for the Paris Olympics, become 70.3 world champ, go to the PTO US Open and win it, and then go and do their first ever Ironman in Kona and still end up in fourth position. Thoughts on Taylor Knibb as a contender for best overall female for this year?
I think the thing that stands out most about Taylor Knibb this season is the fact that she's raced against every other female athlete we have on the shortlist. Who else has got the capacity to do that and is willing to, like she did, try out her first Ironman at the biggest race of the season, at the World Champs in Kona. I think just speaks volumes, not just about her ability as a triathlete, but also her character and how willing she is to just give it a try, whatever it is, and believe in herself. I think Lati, back-to-back Ironman 70.3 World Champ wins was phenomenal. Her race in Milwaukee was amazing, and to get that Paris spot in there as well is just incredible. And I think her season was definitely one that a lot of people will look back on and remember as kind of the complete season almost.
Managed to do the US time trial championships in the middle as well somewhere.
Exactly. I think for me personally, it's quite hard to look past Taylor Knibb, to be honest. Just that ability across all the distances to be competitive is really an incredible skill.
Definitely. So now kind of throwing two more names into the mix. We've got Beth Potter on our shortlist, and I'm also going to probably put down the least wild card that you'll come across because she's the Ironman world champion, but we definitely can't not talk about Lucy Charles-Barclay. So let's start with Beth Potter, WTCS world champion, qualified for Paris, kind of taking that scene by storm, really. What are your thoughts on Beth?
She had a phenomenal season. I think to win that world title, she kind of set the tone in Abu Dhabi with that win and just never looked back. It's not that it seemed inevitable towards the middle of the season, but she was just so strong, especially in Paris and then in Pontevedra to follow that up with another big win. Just bodes really well for her heading into next year, the Olympics. I think there's some question marks over some of her competitors, Georgia Taylor-Brown, Flora Duffy, about returning from injury. But as it stands, I think she's definitely a favourite for a medal and also probably the favourite for the gold. So I think this season has been a big one for her, but it's leading into bigger things.
So finally, Lucy Charles-Barclay. Obviously that Kona performance was spectacular. I think there's definitely been sort of question marks over is the way that she races, she just kind of proved everyone wrong in some ways and being like, I can win Kona like this. But I guess my question mark is we haven't seen her that much this season because of injury. So we haven't seen that kind of full season dominance that maybe we might have.
For you to pick her as your wild card, outside of Kona, perhaps, what would you say has been her biggest achievement this season?
I think that's the difficulty, right? Like she's sort of had fairly decent PTO performances. We had that 5th in Singapore, but again, it's not that sort of dominant Lucy Charles that you'd maybe expect, which is why I think she's definitely got to be in the mix. But as you say, if she's a wild card, then maybe we're answering her in question. John, maybe we need to throw it to you now, and we will let you put your foot down and have your final say.
You've outlined 5 fantastic athletes there. Our readers, I'm sure, will probably be shouting and going, there should be some others there. We've had some great performances, but from my perspective, I'm fairly clear on this one, despite all of those performances. For me, the athlete of the year is Beth Potter. The 2 biggest races of the year were clearly Paris and Pontevedra, and Beth won both of those. She won 4 of the 8 races, and just continued to show that progress that she has shown year on year, as you say. And I think, as Thomas sort of indicated, I think the best is still to come. And actually, the fact that the Olympics is next year, I think for Beth is a great. So with 4 of the biggest 8 races of the year, winning the 2 biggest short course, despite all the other contenders, for me, female overall triathlete of the year is Beth Potter.
Okay, there we go, Beth Potter. So now let's move on to the men's field and try and choose the winner of the Best Male Triathlete Award. On the shortlist, we have got Christian Blumenfeld, Hayden Wild, and Alex Yee. And Thomas, you've got the wild card this time. So should we start with Christian? Obviously, he had that headline-grabbing schedule back in August. What do we think about Christian's performance this year?
I'll start with Christian. It's really quite a strange one, because you look back at 2021 and 2022, and if you were looking in, you go, was this year as good as either of those? And you say, probably not. And yet, he's the PTO number 1. He's not been off the podium in the 3 PTO races. He finished 2 or 3 seconds behind Alex Yee in the Super Sprint World Championship. So you have someone who is so good, yet hasn't had, by his incredible standards, his best season. Yet, when you look at the facts, you probably go, yeah, he has to be on the shortlist, which is probably a measure of his brilliance, really, that in a year where you're going, I don't think he's been at his best, yet he's still absolutely in the mix for one of the best 3, 4 or 5 triathletes in the world.
Yeah, I think John's underlined it perfectly there. Christian, or what Christian would maybe refer to as a poor year for him, sees him come out as the best middle distance athlete in the sport. He had a disappointing race in Lahti after travelling straight back from Singapore, which I think could have been the cherry on top of the cake. Unfortunately, it wasn't to be, but his races in Ibiza, Milwaukee, and Singapore were just incredible. Each of them, even the ones that he didn't win in Ibiza and Milwaukee. And to do as well as he did across the WTCS series with all these other races in every different corner of the globe. I'm really excited to see what he does next year and how he can perform in Kona if he decides to race.
I think Christian's sort of the most versatile athlete going, and I think a lot of people would look at his schedule and think it's impossible, and if anyone can do it, it's Christian. So it's definitely really exciting to see. I think there is that question of, did he stretch himself a little bit too thin this year, and he's maybe missed out on a couple of wins? But like you say, even Christian, not his best, is still right up there getting on the podium, which makes him super excited. Hayden Wild and Alex Yee, we've seen some pretty sort of epic head-to-heads from these guys out on the World Triathlon Series and the Super League scene. What are our thoughts on those two?
Really the next generation, aren't they? Or part of the next generation, because there are more than just the 2 of them, but they're sort of leading the way, and I think they're incredibly refreshing for the sport. The way that when you look at the season as a whole, the races that they've produced, I think they are worthy contenders to be in the...
Yeah, I think both obviously had strong seasons. I think this year, perhaps Alex has excelled a bit more in the kind of one day, one race scenarios where, in Paris, everything mattered in terms of Olympic qualification. All the pressure was on him to deliver on that day, and he did. Whereas Hayden has maybe had the more complete season. We've seen him race well across the WT. But then he also went on after the WTCS season to, race really well in Super. And he also qualified for the Ironman 70.3 World Champs with a win in Melbourne, I think it was. So I think it's hard it's always hard to compare both of them. It's good that Hayden managed to get a win against Alex in Hamburg. But yeah, they're both incredible talents, and I think heading into Paris next year is just going to be so close.
It's really interesting about Hayden with that 70.3 Worlds qualification, because I guess if you're trying to take a holistic look and you're trying to judge them against each other, it's like, well, Hayden's kind of shown that he can also step it up as well as step it down to Super League. So that kind of adds that extra layer of complication, I guess, in the best possible way. Thomas, you've got the wild card. Who's your wild card for this section?
Yeah, I think this was a really tough category just because there's so many people who did really well. They maybe weren't incredible, but they did really, really well across the season. I've gone with last year's world champion, Leo Berger. Kick things off with a win against none other than Jason West at Ironman 2023 Oceanside. He finished on the podium in the WTS series, and obviously he won the Super League series. So I think, yeah, he's shown once again that just by flying under the radar as the world champion, even, he can perform when it matters consistently, race after race, and finish the year on a high.
Yeah, I think that's what makes Leo Berger so interesting, because he is kind of Mr. Consistent, right? Like, it's not these big kind of huge headline performances, but it is that consistency across the season that's really interesting. So yeah, definitely an interesting one to have in the mix.
This is definitely going to be one where I think people will be disagreeing, or not disagreeing, but debating, and I think they should be. That's one of the interesting things. I mean, we haven't even mentioned, for example, the World Triathlon Championship Series champion Dorian Connings, who was a worthy winner of that, because obviously the points process is set at the beginning of the year. How do you choose? But it's a tough one. It really is a tough one. I think the only way I can do it is by just looking at the versatility of that athlete and the quality that they produced outside of their core racing. And so with a tough decision, I think on balance, I'm going to go with Hayden Wild as the men's triathlete. I wouldn't be upset if you were disagreeing with me, because I think I could equally argue for another 5 or 6 names that would probably be worthy as well.
I mean, that's a great thing, right? Any of these men could be named best overall male triathlete, and I think it would be hard to argue. So, okay, thank you, John. We've got our decisions for our first category. So, best female triathlete of the year 2023, we've got Beth Potter, and best male triathlete of the year, we have got Hayden Wild. Okay, that's our category 1. So now we're going to move on to our next category. So we've got best female and male paratriathletes of the year 2023. And again, this is a category where we've got so much talent to choose from. John and Thomas, you guys are going to be sort of the main people that are debating on this one, and somehow I'm going to have to try and decide on. So we'll start with the women, and on the shortlist we've got Francesco Tarantello, Lauren Parker, and Grace Norman. And John, you've got the wild card here. So over to you guys to kick off the debate for this.
Okay, well, Paratri is something that I do get to follow a fair bit. I've been very fortunate to have done quite a lot of on venue commentary at World's Para Series events and World Cups in the UK. So, and it's been really interesting and positive to follow the progress of paratriathlon and the depth of competition over recent years. So just trying to, similar to the elite men and women that we've discussed already, just trying to come up with a short list is a tough one. But we have to come up with that list. And so let's kick it off. Grace Norman, PTS 5 from the United States, gold medalist in Rio, silver in Tokyo, was a clear name that had to be on there. She's been fantastic all season, has won every race, has been a perennial competition, I guess, for Lauren Parker, Lauren Steadman, and Claire Cashmore from the UK, but they're very, very evenly matched swim and bike. But at the moment, Grace just has that edge on the run, and probably be going into next year as a favourite. I'm sure the Brits will be training hard over the winter to try and stop that. But Grace definitely has to be on the short list. Added to that, we've got Lauren Parker from the United States in the PTWC in the wheelchair category. Lauren was part of the finish to a race, finished at any race, and I say that genuinely with no exaggeration. I've written it on the site before. One of the greatest finishes I've ever seen in sport at Tokyo, when Kendall Gretsch it just looked like she had no chance on the blue carpet, and she chased and chased and chased, and Lauren had led that race literally for every single metre apart from basically the last 3 metres. Obviously the heartbreak for Lauren, but since then she has been unbeaten. She's continued to get the better of Kendall, as she has done all season this year. Added to that, she also came over to the UK, went up to Glasgow and won the UCI hand cycle time trial world championships, and I think got silver in the road race as well. So again, one of those athletes that was showing skills beyond her core triathlon specialty. And then my third nomination would be Francesco Tarantello, that you mentioned. In the same way that we've seen the likes of Alex Yee, Hayden Wild, Vasco Villacher, Matt Hauser and co being that sort of new generation coming through, Francesco is still very young. I think she's only 22 next year. She races in the visually impaired PTVI category that's been really dominated since Tokyo by the gold medalist there, Susana Rodriguez. Francesco, fantastic swimmer, won the world championship this year, beat Susana, and it's just showing that ability and that continued depth of competition. So will definitely be a battle to look forward to next year per Susana Rodriguez, Alison Peasgood and others in that women's visually impaired category. So they would be my 3 names, and I guess we're also going to chuck in a wild, and that's within para racing you have 6 categories, and next year the women's PTS3 is the only category that's not been included. However, if you are PTS3 athlete, you are able to what we call race up, so you can go to a less impaired category if you are good enough to race up there, and that's where French athlete Elise Marc comes in. So she's a PTS3 athlete, world champion, has won every race, but she's been so good that she is sitting at number 2 in the Paralympic qualification rankings for the PTS4 division. So has been progressing, got that carrot of a home Paralympic Games. We've got star French paratriathletes. I think she could be another one, and what a story that would be if an athlete was having to race out of a category because that category is not part of the program, was able to medal or potentially even challenge the likes of Kelly Elmlinger for.
I mean, I think there's just so much talent, and he's spoken about all the different categories as well. And I think that's one of the things that just makes paratriathlon so exciting. I was lucky enough to be on the ground in Paris, and I saw how tough it was. That unfortunately the para races were turned to a duathlon. So more than anything, I'm really excited for everyone just to get their opportunity to race, swim, bike and run next year at the Olympics and Paralympics. And I can't wait to see how that turns out.
I've got a very hard decision to make here because I kind of just want to choose all of them. How do I make this decision? It's so difficult. I think for pure kind of versatility, for the fact that she's sort of, obviously Paralympic silver medalist, 3-time world champ, 70.3 world champ, and then can go over to Glasgow and compete in the UCI Worlds. I'm going to have to go with Lauren Parker, but a very, very tough decision. So I think Lauren Parker is going to be my decision for best female. Okay, so next onto the male paratriathletes, and we've got Alexis Hankin-Quant, we've got Jetzer Platt, and we've got Daniel Molina. And John, you've got the wild card to throw into the mix here. So over to you guys. Time to debate these names.
I'll start with Daniel Molina. Mostly because I think it's a really interesting story that maybe not too many people are aware of if they're not close to and following the para side of the sport. So as we referred to Elise Marc having that opportunity to race in a category that she's not in, for Daniel Molina from Spain, His PTS 3, so his category was not part of the program in Rio. It was also not part of the program in Tokyo. And Daniel's been around for a long, long time at a top level, and he actually turns 50 next year. And he's had a fantastic season. He's just been consistent forever and a day. He's won all of his races this year. He's world and European champion. He won in Paris as well, as Thomas mentioned earlier, which was an event that got turned into a duathlon. In fact, the European champs got turned into a duathlon as well. He came over to Swansea, which was an event that I was at and doing the venue commentary at, which got turned into an aquathlon. So he's sort of shown versatility across those different formats, but also that persistence and that desire that, coming up to 50, he is still performing, and it's really quite tight at the top of that men's PTS3 division. There's not a lot of time within it. He's having some great races. So it may be a name that doesn't get the headlines as much as the next two that were mentioned, but I think is worthy of recognition, and we'll see if he gets even more recognition next year. Talking about Paris, home athletes, home favourites. In terms of para, there's no bigger favourite in terms of a home French athlete than Alexis Hunkincon. PTS4, he has not lost a race for, I'm not even sure, probably 4 years. He was over racing in Swansea, so again I got to see him then, and he was going head to head with Martin Schulz, who actually races in PTS5, so that's the lowest impairment category, lower than Alexis, and they were just running stride for stride. Alexis is that good. Again, he's won everything: European champs, world champs, won in Paris, World Paris Series, World Cups, etc., and just continues just to be excellent. And then the final pick, a name that's probably going to be definitely towards the top of any paratriathlon fans' familiarity, but I think maybe next year will be where he becomes one of the biggest para names in any sport. It's difficult to underestimate or overstate, probably is the right word, just how good Jets Platt is. So from the Netherlands, European champion this year, won in Paris at the event that Thomas was out. Unusually, didn't get the World Championship title in Pontevedra this year, but he had suffered a malfunction on his wheel late on, so he was a couple of minutes up and then just got caught by his friend and sometimes training partner and fellow Dutch athlete Gert Schipper at the end, but doesn't take away from Jets's abilities. And where we get to see just how good an athlete he is, he won his 11th hand cycling world championship in Glasgow this year. And then not only that, he's been racing the marathon majors in the wheelchair racing. So against the silver bullet, Marcel Hug, who is the absolute top dog in men's marathon racing. And he's been racing all marathon majors in, I think, Chicago, London, New York, Boston, I think he's done about 4. I think he also did Dubai, and he's been second or third in all of those as well. So you've got a guy who is the best at triathlon. He's typically one of the fastest swimmers across every category. He's also a world championship, 11-time world champion at hand cycling, and now he's also a fantastic wheelchair racer. So you look at that and you go, what an incredible talent. And then from a triathlon perspective, you think it's going to take something pretty special to beat him. So Jets is he's a very special athlete, and I'm not sure what his plans are for next year, what the program is for Paris Paralympic Games, but it would be quite remarkable if we get to see him race in triathlon, in hand cycling, and then in the marathon and or the track athletics. And maybe there's a possibility of gold medals across 3 different sports. which would
That'd
be,
be really quite
I
something,
think, would
wouldn't
give
it?
him, pretty special.
Yeah. So Thomas, you've got the wild card in this round. Who do you want to throw into the mix alongside those three super strong paratriathletes that John's already mentioned?
So it's relatively similar to the situation we had with the women's, actually, where we had so many great athletes, and then just to add in at the end, we had the world champion Lucy Charles Barkley. For this category, we've got Dave Ellis and his guide Luke Pollard. I think they won every single race this season aside from in Madrid at the European Champs. They won in Paris, they won in Pontevedra, and with any luck, Paris next year will be the year. Obviously, heartbreak in Tokyo. So 3 years on, yeah, we'll be lucky to see another great race. And
I've got a very tricky choice here. I think, you talk about sort of obviously Dave Ellis, and there's just that sort of dominance and consistency. And then you've got sort of Daniel Molino, and obviously that's real sort of tenacity. But I think my choice is going to have to be Yates Platt. I think just for that pure kind of being world class across so many different sports, and that real sort of possibility that we could see him coming back with several medals in different sports from the Paralympics in Paris next year. So yeah, I'm gonna stick to my guns. Yates Platt is the winner for this category. That's our best overall athletes. But our next category is the Breakthrough of the Year award. And here we're going to look at those athletes who've either made a significant step up in performance, or those next generation athletes who've kind of made a really strong statement as they've stepped into the senior sort of elite racing scene. Thomas, you've got the tricky job here. You're going to have to be the decision maker in this round. And that means, John, it's you and me who are going to kind of lead the primary debate here. And our shortlist we put together is Rico Bogan, Mathis Margirier, and Frederick Funk. And I've got the wild card here, so I'm going to throw Jason West into the mix as well. John, what are your thoughts on Rico Bogan?
I think that in terms of the status of breakthrough, it would be interesting to know if any, certainly triathlon outlet in the world beforehand predicted Rico to win, as he did in Lati, and it was a fantastic performance. I did watch the coverage from that one, and he was right up there all day long, and he just looked incredibly strong on the run as well. Just didn't look in danger at all, and yeah, it's always one of those things with hindsight. You maybe then look back, and for those that were close and around him, I don't think it came as much of a surprise as it did to many. So he'd won, was it Kraichgau, I think, certainly one of the German 70.3s a month or two before, and had beaten Patrick Lange. So yeah, he was a class act. That was really those two races were the standout. Young athlete. So yeah, it'd be very interesting to see, how he builds from there. And you would think, being young and that 70.3 World Championship, that if those PTO races get established along with the 70.3s, that hopefully we will be seeing a little bit more from Rico, and seeing more races, and seeing, is he able to build on what was a pretty impressive, not debut would be wrong, but a way of making a really significant mark to the wider.
Definitely, I completely agree. I mean, he flew under the radar, and I think that's what made it so exciting. Is it kind of, as much as it wasn't out of nowhere, when you sort of look back at the context, I think sort of within that start list, I don't think anyone expected that. And that's what we love about racing, is when someone unexpected kind of comes and just rips up the script and does something special. I think Mathis Margirier, I think obviously it's kind of been a breakthrough year for him, fourth at 70.3 Wells. He got fourth at that PTO US Open. I think that's what makes me particularly excited about him in terms of a breakthrough, because he was giving those big dogs, Jan and Christian Blumenfeld, a real run for their money. And when you look at his track record this year, I think he was first or second at pretty much every race that he's done. And then we kind of finished the season with that super epic sprint finish with Mika Challenge for Baku. So I kind of think I've got to put him in the mix really for the breakthrough of the year.
He has done, I guess, what maybe would be looking for Rico to be doing next year, in the sense of, he'd had some strong performances last year, but as you indicated there for Matisse, he's just put that season together that has just been really, really consistent, but not just consistent average, but consistently good all the way through. He won the Challenge Championship, which is a race I know Thomas was over at in Samarin, and from memory, I think he won that in pretty impressive, dominant style. So yeah, he's somebody that now I think, if you see him on any start list, you're going to have him as one of your sort of podium contenders, I think.
Absolutely. And then we've got to talk about Frederick Funk as well, sort of that second place at 70.3 worlds. I think for me, what was interesting is that I think he's always been known as kind of like a super biker. But then he did do a really strong run performance at Lati as well, coached by Dan Lorang, who obviously is a known creator of champions. Thoughts on Frederick Funk?
Yeah, he's someone who, I guess on the surface, maybe putting him in the breakthrough might look a little bit strange, because he's been around, but he's one of those athletes that was around and had the odd breakthrough, solid performance, and then it's been more consistent, and he's just sort of built year on year on year, and maybe that's a characteristic of you mentioned the coach Dan Lorang, but that's sort of the way that Dan works, I think. So he's now getting to that point where, almost every race you're going to expect something pretty special, and as you indicated there, he's not just the super biker. He's that swim is getting closer and closer to the front, and he's showing that consistency. And I think that second added to last year or the year before. I haven't got the notes in front of me, but yeah, Frederick is just really consistently now being one of those top guys. So it's almost, rather than the breakthrough, it's just another layer on top of solidifying further and further that, this is a guy that any race, anywhere, he's not going to be too far away.
Yeah, not necessarily kind of that explosion and breakthrough that we've seen with the other athletes. And I think, talking about kind of an explosive breakthrough, we've got to talk about Jason West. He went from 23 in the PTA rankings at the start of this year, and he's finished up in that third position. We've seen him storm to the front of races. Second place at the PTA US Open, obviously, and then he won Clash Miami as well this year. I'm pretty sure he went sub 60 for US Open, so it's undoubtedly he's just this, epic runner. If you're weighing him up against the others, best breakthrough, what do you think?
It's a difficult one, because I think if you go back a year or two, Jason had shown these fantastic run abilities, but they were then, to a large extent, they were then getting him fifths or sixths. So there's always that question mark. Yeah, he's a great runner, but can you make that next step? A little bit like, we've had many athletes over time, and then you say, when they get their swim down, they'll be unbeatable. And it's easy to say, but what Jason has done, as he has made that step from, he's shown, you don't get those podiums in those PTO events and be winning some of those big 70.3s in the States, and challenge races, just by being a moderate swimmer, a solid biker, and a runner. The sport has moved on since then, and Jason has been able to move with it. I think he ended the year top 3 or 4, I think, in the PTO ranking. So that just shows the consistency. So he's definitely one of those athletes that I think very, very few athletes would look around at the end of, if they're in the league group coming into T2, they look around and see Jason there and think, oh, that's all right, I'll run away from him. Maybe Christian. Christian thinks he could beat anybody. He thinks he could beat a Terminator. But even then, everybody wants to leave, if possible, Jason West a couple of minutes at least behind, because they know what's coming. What's also interesting is that he's done it so consistently. You know, you can have an athlete, and you'll know from your own individual racing, you have a good day and a bad day. But Jason, it seems whatever the race is, he never thinks that he's out of contention, whether he's 3, 4, 5 minutes down, and just has shown that consistency of pure triathlon run speed, which sort of reminds me of Anne Haug, really. That's what Annie does. It doesn't matter where she is, you just know that there's going to be a solid run at the end.
I think that's what I like about Jason, is that if there's a race where you've kind of got clear leaders, coming out of T2, then Jason can just come and storm through and just completely shake things up. So it makes him super interesting to watch. All right, Thomas, over to you. Who's our winner?
I think it's a really tough decision, but if I'm gonna treat it as a breakthrough in the true sense of the word, I think I'm gonna have to go with Rico Bogan. I think, like both of you have made great points about, to come through and win that world title, so it's such a young age and in such an unexpected way, is just incredible. And I think, his past performances, Krachgau, he won, beat Patrick Lang, was maybe an indication, but perhaps an indication of a good result, not such a great result. So yeah, I think he's the clear winner for me.
Awesome. Right, well done, Rico. Now on to the women. On our shortlist, we've got Kate Woff, Emma Lombardi, and Marjolaine Pierre. And John, you've got the wild card this time. Let's dive in with Kate Woff. So obviously 2022, she's under 23 world champion, and then we see her kind of become second in the World Triathlon Champion Series in the grand final this year, Super League champion. And I think she's now kind of gone from someone that we were aware of to becoming like a really strong contender for, qualifying for Paris next year, which I think is really exciting. What are your thoughts on Kate Woff, John?
Yeah, Kate is someone that's been around in the British triathlon scene for a long time now. I remember I was out in Spain going back 7 years ago, I think, in Aviles, and she was silver medalist in the Junior World Duathlon Championship. She's been at the podium at the British Triathlon Champs going back many years, and she's I guess this year it's been a breakthrough to that super senior elite level. Yet she's always been around, and one of the really interesting things, if you dig into the detail of Kate's results, and you look at the times when she has been at those junior championships, be it European or World, it's those races where she's had her best results. So it's sort of almost been on the cards that she's somebody that, and I've had this discussion with her, she seems to be able to put her best performances together sort of when it matters, really. And that's a really positive thing for any athlete to do. But I think an absolute breakthrough this year, in the sense that she has really made that jump to now she is one. She's definitely going to be a contender to make the British Olympic team. And I think if you make the British Olympic team in the women's ranking, certainly, then you're going to have to be a contender for medals, both individual and relay. So it's been fantastic to see. We saw the first glimpse of it in Paris. I think she was 7th in Paris. Then had that Super League win in Toulouse, which I think gave her a lot of confidence. Solidified that with the Super League overall standings, and then second in Pontevedra was sort of the icing on the cake, really. So in terms of a breakthrough and a well-rounded season, fantastic from Kate Woff, and there's a lot of work has got into that. It's not been a season, there's a decade and more of effort of that saying about overnight success. It's not an overnight success, but it's great to see where she has got to and what she's achieved.
Yeah, definitely. And I think in terms of, yes, it's not kind of this out of nowhere breakthrough, but I think that stepping right up into that senior elite category and not just holding her own, but actually kind of really shaking things up and being right at the front of races and stuff makes her super exciting. Emma Lombardi then, sort of, again, an athlete who's just had a really, really consistent and well-rounded season. I think we checked, was it second place in Cagliari, third overall, if I got that right. And then, third in the Super League as well. So again, showing that she can perform on both stages and be right at the pointy end of races when it counts. What are your thoughts on Emma Lombardi versus Kate Woff in terms of contention for this award?
Oh, it's interesting. I think Emma, to the best of my knowledge, I think came to triathlon much later. I think she's only been involved in triathlon 4 or 5 years, so clearly has come in with a lot of the talent, a lot of ability. She won the under 23 champs, if I'm not mistaken, in 2021, I think. And has just seemed to make that transition from that sort of junior straight under 23 into the seniors almost as if it wasn't there. She's very consistent across the disciplines, really strong. She seems to excel at that longer Olympic format as well. Has done really well in Cagliari the last 2 years. Really, really consistent. And it'd be interesting to see if going into Paris, because I think there'll be a lot of spotlight, and for good reason, on Cassandra Beaugrand as the sort of maybe the face of the French triathlon team in terms of the females. Maybe that might actually help Emma in that she will be seen as the sort of the second athlete. But actually, you look at the results, she's not that far away, and maybe a little bit less pressure, a little bit less focus on a younger athlete. I think she could do something really special if she can just again make that little step up from where she is this year, to go from that consistent podium finisher to a WTCS winner.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot to be said for kind of having that slightly less pressure on her shoulders. Pressure obviously just adds an extra layer to the racing, so that would be really exciting. Moving on to sort of more of the long distance scene, then we've got Marjolaine Pierre. I think she's a really exciting racer to watch, and I think I read that she's only been a pro since 2021. So when you consider that she also had 4 stress fractures in 2022, that's kind of it's a very short amount of time that she's made quite an impact. I think she did her debut at the long distance World Championships, and she won it sort of by a stonking amount, almost 10 minutes or something crazy like that. What do you think about Marjolaine Pierre as a breakthrough athlete this year?
Definitely worthy of that. We saw glimpses of that last year, but what she seems to have done this year is taken that step up. So she's now far more in the mix throughout, rather than having to come running through the field late on into a podium position. So, you tend to just look at how is an athlete developing, and you can see those improvements in the same way that when we talked about Beth Potter earlier, you say, well, those steps have just been there. We've seen them year on year. And, Marjolaine, she appears to be on that pathway as well.
Yeah, love to see it. So then your wild card, I'm intrigued. Who are we bringing to the conversation?
Well, my wild card, I think this is more of a wild one, and I'm not putting this forward really in the sense of a potential winner, but in terms of a breakthrough, and a name that I don't think any of us would have known. Real youngster, that's Fanny Zalai from Hungary, who we saw have that seemingly out of nowhere. I don't know how Super League managed to identify her or find her, or what the connection was, but it was at the Arena Games. Would have been the Swiss race, I think. Got podium there, and was definitely scaring some of the senior athletes. The Zanet Bragmeyer, I think Liv Matthias, I think, was on the podium. So that's some solid competition, and she was right up there. But I've been following her progress a little bit since then, and I got to commentate on her. She did her first ETU Junior Cup, which was one of the interesting things, because I went to look at her history in terms of racing, and obviously she was only 15, so she hadn't even done one ETU Cup. And I happened to be doing the commentary for a race in Caorle in Italy this year, and she just blitzed the field. I mean, she got to the run, and fantastic. But then you go to, say, Neon, and I think she was 5th or 6th ahead of the likes of Sophie Caldwell and some class athletes. So there's definitely something there. We definitely don't want to put pressure on athletes that are 15, 16, but she has been out there in the triathlon arena now. So it'd just be interesting to see if we flick back to maybe this conversation in 2, 3 or 4 years' time. Hopefully we'll see that she's still enjoying the sport, still progressing, and who knows where she could get to.
Absolutely. I think we definitely need to be talking about Fanny Salai in this conversation, because it's not that, she's got this incredible performance, but I think for me, what really makes her stand out is the fact that she is only 15 and she's competing against these huge names in the sport who are so experienced. And she just stays so calm and composed. And I think there's a lot to be said for that, particularly in Super League racing, because it is fast, furious, high octane chaos, really, isn't it? So I think an athlete who can be that young and can be that composed and perform so well on that stage, those seniors have got to have sort of one eye over their shoulder, right, with sort of knowing that she's coming up behind them over the next couple of years. I think definitely someone to be very aware of.
She's maybe not even next gen, she's next gen, but we'll see. But certainly an interesting name, and one I thought was worthy of adding into the breakthrough mix, if you like.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, Thomas, decision time. He's our winner.
I think this is a really tightly contested category, especially between Kate Woff and Emma Lombardi for me. I think if we get the matchup we hope in Paris, it's going to be a big race between Beth Potter and Cassandra Beaugrand. But equally, for that third spot, there's a high chance they'll be almost kind of the British and French lieutenants in Kate Woff and Emma Lombardi. And I think that battle for bronze, if both are selected to the team, will be as exciting as the one between Beaugrand and Potter. So it's a tough call between those two. I think Lombardi was maybe better overall during the length of the season, but Kate Woff just had some incredible races. Pontevedra was a real breakthrough, and the Super League series was a great way to finish out an incredible year. So I think I'm going to have to go with Kate Woff.
Kate Woff. Okay, awesome. Well done, Kate. So moving on to our fourth award category, and this is Performance of the Year award. This year is for athletes where, potentially their season as a whole might not have meant that they have kind of been in contention to win that best overall athlete of the year category, but they've still had a standout, exceptional performance, which absolutely deserves recognition. Now, for this one, we've actually got 6 people on our shortlist, and I think we might have to let John pick 2 winners here for male and female, because I think it's a bit mean to try and narrow it down to one person. It's almost impossible. So on our shortlist, we have got Magnus Ditlev for his performance at Challenge Roth, Daniel Arif at Roth as well, obviously setting that record, Jan Frodeno for that win at PTO US Open in Milwaukee, Lucy Charles Barkley for that Kona Guns Tape performance, Alex G for that Paris performance, and then finally we've got Kat Matthews for her win at Ironman Texas. So John has mentioned you're the decision maker here, and we are going to be nice and let you choose 2 people. I think for me, out of that shortlist, Daniela Ryf has got to be a super strong contender, because she not only dominated the field to win at Roth, but she absolutely smashed that women's world record in the process. Thomas, out of that, who's your top pick?
That's a really tough one, I think. Daniela Ryf seemingly is coming into the twilight of her career, but just does something big every single season to keep her in the conversation. And Roth was that example this year. Both her and Ditlev, they had just incredible races, off-the-chart performances, and I think it's really tough to overlook those 2 in this category. We had some other incredible races that we're going to talk through, but we've got to kind of step back and realize, as Daniela's perhaps going into her last couple of seasons, that this was a performance for the ages.
I'll just add to that. I know I'm going to be the decision maker, but I think one of the interesting bits, it's almost like you've got a career like Daniela's, and where you've done everything, and most things you've done multiple times over, and it was almost like, is there anything left? And to the degree that we might put value on record times, etc., that was almost, she didn't have that one, and now yes, she's got that one as well. So it's a, I don't want to say that it cements a career, because as you said, Thomas, she seems to be able to just pull out something every year, and we'll probably see something again next year. But what a way to further add to your already incredible palmares.
Absolutely. And obviously Magnus had that incredible performance at Roth as well. But I think talking about kind of people in that twilight of their career, Jan Frodeno at the PTO US Open. What do you guys think about
I think that performance was just a joy to watch for fans of the sport. I think so many people had just been rooting for him throughout the season. He had the disappointment of not being able to start in Oceanside. Ibiza was a great race to see him back at, but obviously he wasn't as close to the front as so many people were hoping for. Had a couple of races in between there, a win in Andorra, and then to do it on, after Nice, one of the biggest stages against the likes of Blumenfeld, Jason West. Ditlev was in that race, unfortunately ended up not finishing. It was just incredible to see him take the...
It was kind of a real message to those young guns, kind of trying to challenge him that he really is the greatest of all time, which was amazing to see. So now thinking about Alex Yee in Paris, incredible performance. Do we think that's enough to kind of put him in contention for this award?
Yeah. Does it get the win? Well, I'll have to decide in the next few minutes, I guess. But I think one of the really interesting bits from that is when you get the likes of Vasco Valacha. I think was he second, or I can't remember which way around it was with Vasco and Dorian. After the race, you've got one of your competition just going, at the moment, Alex is just so much better than us. I think that was the quote. I hope I remember the quote correctly. And then in a more recent comment that we had and featured on the site, I think it was Max Stapley sort of said maybe that was the first time that we've seen Alex at 100% actually really going full gas on. You just sort of think, even if Hayden hadn't had his unfortunate misfortune before the race and been able to run, would anybody have beaten Alex from T2 on the run that day? I don't know. Interesting conversation, and I'm sure there's some scientists and athletes in Norway hoping to prove that wrong for next year. But yeah, it was pretty special what he did in a short course sense that day.
Yeah, he's hoping he can repeat it in Paris next summer as well, right? So Kat Matthews, that performance at Ironman Texas, I think obviously Kat had that really horrific crash sort of back end of 2022, and that's an awful lot to come back from, both physically and mentally. And I don't think, obviously we were all sort of willing her on with that race, and she had that great performance at Oceanside, but I don't think you would have almost put that pressure on her to come and have a classic Kat Matthews performance. And then she went ahead and did it anyway. What do you think about that, you guys?
I think, there's a lot to be said just from this kind of strength of character perspective. To have been hit by a car in the build-up to what was said to be one of the biggest races of the season for her. Obviously, she did so well in St. George and was really one of the firm favourites for Kona. And at the time, she was on a training camp in Texas, where Ironman Texas takes place, the Woodlands. And yeah, just a horrific crash caused by a car and the injuries she sustained. The kind of timeline between that and coming back in April, I think it was the end of April, to race in Ironman Texas and to go back there and perform so well, it's just really incredible. And it kind of puts into perspective just how amazing of an athlete she is, not just with her physical capabilities, but also the mental strength to come back from something and get herself in the position to be competitive on the start line and then follow through after more than 8 hours of race.
I think it just shows how resilient she is and that sort of tenacity to go and do that sort of performance. You can't deny that, really. We've talked about Kona a little bit there, so we've got to talk about Lucy Charles-Barclay in Kona this year. Obviously, she didn't quite make it to being our best overall triathlete of the year, but we've got to talk about that performance because it was pretty stunning.
Yeah, and I'd say what came out afterwards almost was kind of part of the reason there's such a complete and incredible performance, to hear about the struggle she's had with the injury on the run during that race, and just kind of how almost when she looked the most likely of winning coming off the bike, she was in fact kind of internally trying to keep herself together and not fall apart. And yeah, to just be able to put that performance together after so long, 4 consecutive second place finishes in Hawaii, it's just such a well-deserved victory and such a testament to the long-term process of elite sport and triathlon.
I think knowing that she got on that run, and obviously so many times before she's got there first, and then she's been sort of hunted down by the likes of Annie Haug. So I think for her to be in that level of pain with the injury that she mentioned that she sort of picked up on that run, and to hold it together. And I think Kona's a tricky course as well, because there are stretches that are so lonely, the energy lab, but also sort of once you get up out of a lead drive, it's a really mentally tough course, I think, for athletes. So to lead from gun to tape on your own all day, definitely got to put her into strong contention. John, I don't know how you're going to choose this one. Do you want to pick your male best performance of the year first?
Let's try. Before we do that, I think what all the stuff that you've described there, it almost it's part of why we love sport, and although this category is performance of the year, and in any one of these, and there's a couple of others that I'll mention in a second that we could probably add in as well, are insane. What we also love, I think, about sport is the story that goes with it. It's not just person X ran this time and that's fast because it says so on the stopwatch. It's Daniela Reef, is the clock counting down, and then she produces that. It's Frodeno of injury, 40, you're people saying you're past it, and then you come back. That race will probably play on Christian Blumenfeld's mind for the next 15 years, because he'll never be able to put it right. Kat Matthews, as you said, that strength of character. It's like those things all add in more to what they did, rather than just a physical performance of they've got immense talent and they train hard and they produced a fast time and won a race by a large margin. And there are others. I mentioned a couple of others. Max Newman, almost forgotten really, because he wasn't able to sort of capitalise on it for the rest of the season through injury. But all the talk before that race in Ibiza was the last 4 Olympic gold medalists of Brownlee, Frodeno, Blumenfeld, and Ozzie Blake, trained by his brother. No BS science or whatever his quote was afterwards, and he goes and takes the win. I mean, what a story there. Sam Laidlow, what a awesome performance in terms of French athlete in France, first world championship there. And it could go on and on. But how do we come up with it's incredibly tough. How do I pick? Do you go with head, go with heart? Do you go with a combination of both? I think I'm going to go with a combination of both. And I think the performance for the men that probably will resonate the most with most triathletes, and was maybe the one that would have almost everybody standing up and applauding, is Jan Frodeno at the PTO US Open. You saw the GOAT. He was talking it up, you can say, with the benefit of hindsight beforehand, but once again he produced it, and he didn't get the ultimate goodbye present at Nice, but that's a pretty good exit before retirement, isn't it? So I think Jan Frodeno for the men is going to be my pick.
Yeah, hard to argue with that. It's a pretty stunning performance. I also love that they had them in the big cheese hats afterwards, just that it really added something to a fest. So great choice, John. Okay, so now female, who are we going with?
I think it has to be between two. I think we gave Beth Potter the overall athlete of the year. I think rightly. Her performance in Pontevedra, great. but I think this has to come down to a choice between Daniela Ryf at Roth and Lucy Charles-Barclay at Kona. I couldn't rate Daniela's performance at Roth higher. I mean, it's like, what more could she do? And yet, I think it comes second in this category, which I think is remarkable. Look, we can put that second. But for, I guess, those reasons of having a race where everybody within the sport that knows the sport was so excited about Kona, and having that field where we think everybody is there that could win. And I guess with the addition of Taylor Nick, an outsider, she could win as well. On the background of that, always the bridesmaid, never the bride. Not that in conversations that I had with Lucy, did I ever think that was a mental block in any way with that injury. And, I don't know if you saw any pictures of her a couple of days later going to the airport. She was being pushed around in a wheelchair because her calf was basically the colour of a tomato. To do what she did in the most competitive long distance race that I think we've ever seen, to lead from the first stroke to the last, to run her best time ever with that injury and take that title, it's difficult for me to look past that. So I have to go with Lucy Charles-Barclay as my performance of the year. And if I could give it joint, I would give it to Daniela as well, because that was awesome. But I don't think you're going to allow me to. So LCB for number one for me.
Yeah, got to have some level of strictness here. No, I completely agree. I think it's a testament to the strength of the athletes in the field that we can be talking about those two performances and the other performances and have so much choice. But I think Lucy's performance was it was a performance that everybody wanted her to have. I think everyone was willing her on, even her competitors, which just makes it such a standout performance. So there we have it. Best performance. We've got Jan Frodeno and Lucy Charles-Barclay. So final category now. We've been talking a lot about the athletes, but obviously what makes this all happen is the races. So we've got to talk about the races, and that is the Race of the Year award. This award is recognising races that were sort of either had an exceptional depth of field, they were a super exciting race to watch, or that they contributed to sort of growing the sport of triathlon, or all three. There's been an awful lot of great racing this year. So again, another category that was really tricky. But I think our shortlist we finally came down to was the PTO European Open in Ibiza, Challenge Roth, and the Women's Ironman World Championship in Kona. So John and Thomas, it's kind of over to you guys to debate it all out. John, you've also got the wild card for this round if you want to introduce that. And I've somehow got to decide at the end of it all. So away you go. Where do we start?
I think we should start in Ibiza and maybe get Thomas to give us the lowdown on that, because he had the magic ticket. He was out to Spain. He got to see it firsthand. But yeah, we saw the start lists for both the men's and the women's New Year of the PTO. It was great, but Thomas saw it firsthand. So yeah, give us the inside track, Thomas.
I think Ibiza was incredible for a lot of reasons. I think the atmosphere in particular there on the ground was something that I hadn't expected to see at a kind of middle distance to long distance triathlon race. And it really kind of felt like the PTO had got a lot of things right in terms of they'd managed to get the event at the same time as the multisport world champs, which just meant that there were so many people out on the course supporting. They'd really built up the hype with Alistair racing, Jan racing, Christian there. And I think everyone from the athletes who'd raced the previous days in the age group events to the elites who'd been racing in the duathlon world champs or the aquathlon world champs, everyone was really excited for kind of the pinnacle of the week, which was the men and women's race in the PTO tour. And then onto the race day itself, it didn't disappoint. There was a lot of really close racing. In particular in the men's race, it kind of really went down to the wire between Max and Christian chasing him down the whole way. And in the women's race, we just got to see an absolutely dominant Anne Haug. And it was a really incredible event. And I think it's going to be one that everyone's looking forward to next September.
Amazing. So then, John, how do you counter that? Roth or Kona? Which one do you want to go for?
I'll go for Kona, because we've already talked about that a little bit. our choice, or my choice, of the female performance of the year. But yeah, there was so much going on with Kona of this, the first time of the split championships. But it was just fantastic. The build up, the performances, the quality of field, and we had that discussion internally, and it looked as though that was pretty much reflected by the wider industry, the bookmakers, of whatever we came up with, what we thought was that Super 7 almost of these are the top 7 athletes, and we couldn't even come to a top 10. We had to go to 11 because we couldn't decide how the hell do we get to an 11. And those athletes, they really perform, and what a finish in terms of Lucy's performance that we've obviously discussed, what was going on through the field, just very, very special, and it was great that I think as an industry, although there's rightly lots of debates of whether do we want the men and women racing together same day, or as it was last year, separate days or whatever, the women's race was just fantastic.
Absolutely. I think it did a lot to sort of really spotlight a lot of women in the sport as well. Not only the athletes, but I think it was fantastic having sort of, a lot of the legendary women from the sport in the commentary booth, and just kind of getting that holistic view as well. So definitely a strong contender here. Challenge Roth is kind of the biggest triathlon party in the universe. What do we reckon? Challenge Roth versus PTO, Ibiza, and Kona?
We're spoiled. Riches. What performances that we had from those athletes. You look at both of the winners. The sport is just progressing, and then arguably Magnus's performance was possibly the second best performance of the day, because Daniela probably takes the biscuit on that. So what a magnificent showcase for the sport it is. And they put the broadcast on well. Our colleague Jonathan was out there and he was raving about it. He said, what an experience it is.
Yeah, there's nothing like it. It's just, I went out there this year as well to watch, and I think what stands out with Roth is just the spectators as well. I think it's rare that you go to a race and there are so many people who are out there just absolutely loving a sport. And when you see those iconic images of Solar Hill, but also the swim start, when do you ever get that many people that get up at the crack of dawn to go and watch people kind of thrash around in some water and wetsuits? Not that often, but at Roth that happens. So yeah, it's definitely a strong contender.
Yeah, they really have managed over many decades now. They've got that engagement with the local community. I think literally every other race in the world will look on and just go, I wish we could take some of whatever that magic dust is, however they've created it. And I suspect there are elements of probably even Felix and his team maybe now don't even know how it's happened, but it's just some symbiosis of the right event in the right place, because Roth itself is not a huge place. They've created this thing that us as triathlon fans love, that the locals love supporting, they love volunteering for, and the athletes, if they can fit it in, it's almost like a rite of passage. I want to go to Roth at some point, and every athlete would love to win Roth. So it's definitely one of those Grand Slam events or marquee events of our sport, and long may it continue.
Absolutely. All right, wild card then, to throw a spanner in the works. What are we going with?
Okay, my wild card, and I'll be upfront, I don't think this wild card can really compete with those three. So I'm not putting this forward as a potential winner. But it was probably a surprise race in terms of an event that I really enjoyed. And this is World Series event. It was on a pretty flat course that you would think pretty unexciting. But WTCS Cagliari this year, if you watched it and you really enjoy triathlon, I think you'd be engrossed in both of those races. We had things that we probably never thought we would see. So Gwen Jorgensen being lapped out on the bike, like, I know that was relatively early in her comeback, but certainly Gwen was not expecting that. Alex Shee fall over at the start of the swim and come back to win. We had that relatively flat bike course, yet we had a breakaway that was just full gas all the way, and even the likes of Blumenfeld couldn't get back. And then we had that what we've been looking for, that head-to-head run for the men between Alex and Hayden. It was 28.5 or something of that, with these two guys going absolutely full gas, shoulder to shoulder for 9.9k until Alex sort of pulled away in that very last. I thought that was a really, really exciting World Triathlon Series race this year.
Oh, I've got my work cut out for me here, haven't I? I think, Thomas, the points you raised about, Ibiza, definitely incredible race. And I think, like you say, having sort of the age group race going on at the same time, and those age groupers being able to then watch the pro race makes it quite unique, because obviously triathlon is unique in that you can race the same course as the pros, but it's rare that you can do your own race and then get to actually fully see the pro race as well. So that's incredible. Roth, as I said, it's just, the biggest triathlon party out there. And I think it's just one of those iconic races. Kona, I think Kona's going to have to be my pick, which is probably the really obvious choice. It's almost the boring choice, but I think Kona this year, it was that start list, it was that strength and depth of field, and it was the fact that there were so many genuine contenders, 16 women going sub-9. It just shows, and it was an incredibly strong field. But I think kind of from growing the women's side of the sport, from generating those wider conversations about the women's side of triathlon, I just think it was kind of a game changer, really. So yeah, I'm going to go with Kona for race of the year.
Yeah, good choice. Good choice, but yeah, could have equally been, if you'd said Roth or Ibiza, they might be second or third, but I think we can probably all agree they were very, very, very close second or third, and they, I'm sure our PTO will be proud of that event, and Challenge Roth rightly will be very proud of what they have built and continue to build and develop, and they're going to win many, many awards for years to come. And yeah, I'm sure we all look forward to the first week of July next year and see what's going to happen again.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's it. We've made it to the end. That's all the award categories for this year. I don't know about you guys, but that was seriously tough to call on all counts. So thank you for attempting it with me. For those of you watching, let us know what you think about our award winners. Do you agree, or do you think we got it totally wrong? Leave a comment on the video and come and be part of the debate. That's it for this year, but we've got a ridiculously exciting year of triathlon in 2024 coming. So just make sure you stay tuned for Tri247's predictions for 2024.